Today's speaker is a longtime Seattleite with a passion for local government. He began his public service career at age 19 and went on to serve for 8 years as legislative assistant to then City Council member Norm Rice. In 1987, he won a seat on the King County Council, where he served for 14 years. On January 1st of 2002, Greg Nichols began serving as mayor of Seattle, and since then has earned a national reputation for innovative leadership on transportation, public safety, jobs, climate change, and other challenges facing America's cities. Greg has told us time and again that his priorities are getting Seattle moving, keeping our neighborhoods safe, creating jobs and opportunities for all Seattleites, building strong families and healthy communities. I could tell you from firsthand experience, Mayor Nichols is zealous in his efforts to maintain close personal contact with the citizens of Seattle. In that spirit, this year, in a departure from recent practice, he requested the opportunity to deliver his annual State of the City address before our club. Mr. Mayor, we are honored to oblige. Fellow Rotarians, fellow Seattleites, please welcome His Honor, the 51st Mayor of the great city of Seattle, Greg Nichols.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen, members of the council, Rotarians, and friends and neighbors. First, let me thank Rotary for allowing me to bring the State of the City address outside of the hallowed halls of City Hall to a larger audience, a larger proportion of our public, because these are issues that affect each and every one of us and our future. I am pleased to report to you today that the state of our city is strong and growing stronger. You know, Seattle is a fairly young city. It's been 155 years since a small band of settlers landed on the shores of Elliott Bay to start a new life. They possessed a couple of things of tremendous value: a sense of what was possible and the determination to achieve it. Fortunately for them, a remarkable man, Chief Seattle, happened to be in West Seattle at the time of their landing. Through the years, the city that was named for that remarkable man, Seattle, has overcome enormous challenges and enjoyed great success. When fire leveled the city in 1889, we did not abandon our home on Puget Sound. We rebuilt it stronger than ever. When we created our water, power, and park systems in the early 1900s, we didn't think in terms of years, we thought in terms of centuries. When we invited the world to Seattle for the 1962 World's Fair, we did not focus on the past, we celebrated the future. What other city would dare to build a spaceship on a stick and call it its enduring icon but Seattle? We have prospered through booms and busts. The people of Seattle have had an unshakable belief in their power to create a better future for themselves and for our children. That is the spirit of Chief Seattle, a sense of what is possible and the determination to achieve it. As I travel across our city, it is clear that Seattle's spirit is as strong as ever. But as strong as our city is today, there's a threat that not only clouds the future of our city, but the future of the entire planet: global warming pollution from the burning of fossil fuels. We know that our climate is changing. We can see it in the declining snowpack and retreating glaciers right here in the Pacific Northwest. For us, the threat is clear. It isn't just a shorter skiing season, but a warmer planet means less snowfall in our mountains. And we need that snowfall to provide clean, pure water to drink, to power our homes and our businesses, to fill the streams and rivers for salmon, and to replenish our forests. Here in Seattle, we have pledged to do something about this threat. On February 16, 2005, the day the Kyoto Protocol became law in 141 countries across the globe, but not in the United States, I pledged that Seattle would meet or exceed the reductions called for in the protocol. But I knew if we pursued this goal alone, reducing 680,000 tons of carbon out of our atmosphere by 2012, it would have been a purely symbolic gesture. And so I challenged mayors from across the United States to join with us in taking local action. Today, I'm proud to report that 418 mayors from across the nation have signed the agreement and stand with us to take local action. Together, we represent all 50 states and nearly 61 million Americans. That's larger in population than Italy, about the same as the United Kingdom or France. Thanks to a vision of what was possible and a determination to achieve it, a symbolic act has become an engine for real change. I want to thank everyone who has supported this important effort. It represents the best of the Seattle spirit. And already a climate of change is occurring within our city. Through Bridging the Gap and Transit Now, we're going to make it easier to get around the city by bicycle, on foot, and in transit. We've earned a reputation as America's green building capital. This summer, we're going to launch a public education campaign to allow people to figure out how in their own homes they can reduce their greenhouse gas pollution, how they can do that at work and on the road. Together, we're making a difference for the future of our planet. But it's just a small start. To truly turn the tide on climate change, we're going to need to commit to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions far more, about 80% by the year 2050. Some might say that that's impossible, but here in Seattle, we see the possibilities and we're determined to achieve them. This is a pivotal moment for us in this community and for all the human race. Today, for the first time in human history, more people live within cities than do not. As the engines of the world's economy, cities consume about 2/3 of the energy that is consumed worldwide. Some might look at that and conclude that cities are the problem. I look at that and conclude that cities are the solution. And so in Seattle, we say to the country and to the world, as President Kennedy did 41 years ago, ask not what the climate can do for you, but what together we can do to protect our climate. By all accounts, the Puget Sound region is going to continue to grow. In fact, they estimate about 1.6 million more people will join us by the year 2040. If we take the steps now to shape that growth, our urban centers will be enriched by a diversity of new jobs, opportunities, and people. But if we rely on the status quo, the tide of growth can destroy and overwhelm the very spirit that makes our area such a wonderful place to live. The choice before us is simple. Do we grow smart and address the challenges that we face, or do we grow worse and resign ourselves to a more troublesome and much warmer future? It is incumbent, I think, on us today to choose the right path and to build a great city. To do that, we need to change the way that we think about the challenges that confront us. We need to have a vision of what's possible and the determination to achieve it. In the age of global warming, the choices that we make on a wide variety of issues, from education and housing to public safety and transportation, don't just affect the quality of life in our neighborhood or in our city, they affect the future of life on our planet. How we build our cities may well determine the fate of our planet. So, growing smart means, well, being smart. Let's start with our public schools that are charged with educating our children. Today, too many parents in Seattle face a difficult choice. Stay in the city and put their faith in a school system that fails to inspire confidence, or move to the suburbs and trade the promise of a better education for a longer commute. Every year in Seattle, the Seattle Public Schools shrink by another 600 students. Parents choosing to send their children to school districts outside of Seattle or to private schools. That's the equivalent of a large elementary school moving out each year. That must stop. Instead of losing children to suburban schools, we should be attracting families with children back into the city. Public education is the foundation of a great city. Our schools, though, have reached a state of disarray that goes beyond finances. It has become a crisis of confidence. What we need most right now is a vision for how to create the best education system in the country. With a majority of the seats on the school board up for election this fall, we have a chance to set a new direction. And today we have a powerful tool for helping to improve the lives and education of thousands of children in Seattle. The $117 million Family and Education Levy approved by Seattle voters 2 years ago. The levy sets a new direction for how the city will invest in the success of all of our children. For the first time, we are closely tracking the results of programs aimed to prepare children for kindergarten, to close the achievement gap, and to increase the graduation rates from our high schools. Almost all of the levy programs met or exceeded the goals that we set for them in the first year. That's something that we should be proud of, but it also means that our expectations are set far too low, both for ourselves and for our children. That too must change. The vision is clear. We live in the best educated city in America. We should have the best public schools in America. Our students are up to the challenge. We must give them the tools that they need to succeed in school and in life. We begin by setting higher expectations for ourselves, and then we demand the governor and the legislature increase funding. Today, Washington State is 42nd in the nation per pupil in funding our public schools. We're just behind Nebraska and just ahead of Alabama. We should be in the top 10 by the year 2010. Growing smart means decent and affordable housing. People should be able to afford housing near where they work and not be forced to commute from outlying counties. In Seattle, people used to have a split personality about growth. We hated sprawl and we despised density. Today, I'm proud to say that we've had a great debate and we've changed our attitude about using density as a tool for creating a vibrant and compelling, affordable city. Across the city, we see new homes and new investments sprouting up in urban neighborhoods. Ballard, Northgate, Southeast Seattle, and our Center City neighborhoods are creating the kind of mixed-use neighborhoods that will absorb growth that might otherwise have sprawled into distant suburbs. And urban growth has a direct benefit to our environment. A single 200-unit residential tower is the equivalent of 45 acres of a typical suburban development. The average person living in a city produces 1/3 less carbon dioxide, that's the pollution that creates global warming, than someone who lives in the suburbs. So we've taken steps to encourage more housing, especially in our center city. Today, more than 2,000 units are under construction, and an estimated 20,000 more homes will be built in or near downtown over the next 20 years. The multifamily tax credit that Councilmember Drago and Councilmember Godden supported has created 800 affordable housing units in our city. We're using our housing levy not just to help the very poor, but also to create first-time home ownership opportunities for our teachers and others who work in the city. Even eliminating minimum parking requirements in our neighborhood business districts can help keep homes more affordable. Letting the market determine if that $25,000 cost for a single parking stall is necessary. Fewer parking spaces means more living spaces. The vision is clear. If you live in Seattle, you should be able to afford to live in Seattle, and we have the determination to get there. We're also determined to help the most vulnerable people in our community by ending homelessness in our region. Seattle has joined with King County and nonprofit organizations like Family Services that you're supporting to give people the support that they need to break the cycle that led them to the streets. The strategy is called Housing First. Between 500 and 700 chronically homeless people live on our streets today. They're the toughest people to reach, often suffering from mental illness, from drug or alcohol addiction, or both. And on many days, these people end up in the Harborview Emergency Room, the Sobering Center, or in the King County Jail, cycling through in a very expensive system without ever getting the real help that they need. Housing First will provide these folks with a safe, secure place to live and with the health and treatment services they need to get better. It is not only more humane, it is more effective. I had a chance just before Christmas to visit with two ladies, Judith and Sunshine, who are residents at Plymouth on Stewart. Plymouth on Stewart is using this Housing First approach to help 20 people who have been chronically homeless. Judith and Sunshine have had their lives reconnected to their family and community. In fact, as I was visiting with Sunshine in her home just before Christmas, her mother called. And I could only imagine the expression on her mother's face when Sunshine said, "Mom, I can't talk right now, the mayor is here." Later this year, Judith and Sunshine will celebrate their first full year in a real home. And for the first time in many years, they can see a better future. We applaud their determination. Growing smart requires feeling safe. Keeping the public safe is a challenge in every city across America. If people don't feel safe in their homes or on the streets, they're going to move to where they do. We're fortunate to live in one of the safest big cities in America. Last year, crime in Seattle fell 8.2%. Crime's the lowest per capita since 1972. But don't try and argue Thank you. But don't try and argue statistics with people who have been victims of crime. I want to thank the men and women of the Seattle Police Department for their dedication and service. We rely on them. We rely on them each and every day to keep Seattle safe, and they do a terrific job. Last night I went up to Harborview to visit Officer Brad DePlish. Officer DePlish was injured a couple of weeks ago when he was responding to a neighborhood home invasion crime in the Mount Baker neighborhood. He was surrounded by his family and his fellow Seattle police officers, and he's recovering from very serious injuries. But I want to say to Officer DePlish, to all of the officers of the Seattle Police Department, how much it means to us that every day that they decide that they're going to come to work, they're putting their lives on the line. And as our city grows in this new century, so must our police department. A few months ago, I challenged Police Chief Gil Kurlikowski to work with me to develop a plan that will build on our successes and make our neighborhoods even safer in the years to come. We call that strategy neighborhood policing, and it represents the most significant improvement in police services in this city in more than 30 years. The goal is simple: to make policing stronger, faster, and smarter in every neighborhood in our city. So how do we do that? By adding more patrol officers, by changing the way we deploy our current force, and focusing more resources on crime prevention. What will it mean in your neighborhood? We'll improve response times in emergencies and increase the number of officers on your street. Those officers will be able to spend more time and energy focused on tackling persistent problems that are specific to your neighborhood. And there will be officers free to respond should there be a citywide or regional emergency. To achieve our goal, it will require adding 154 new patrol officers by 2012. That's a 25% increase in patrol staffing. We've made a tremendous start on that effort, thanks again in part to the council members who are here today, Jan Drago and Jean Godden, and the other members of the council. We've added 49 of those 154 officers to date. But starting next year, we're going to add an average of 21 officers a year until we reach our goal of stronger, faster, and smarter neighborhood safety. Simply adding more officers, though, is not enough. We have to make better use of those who are currently in our force. The plan calls for changing the way that we deploy our current force so that we'll have more officers on duty during times of greatest need, namely late morning and Friday and Saturday nights. We do a good job of responding today, but during the busiest times of the day and night, it can be very challenging. The goal of neighborhood policing will be to respond to emergency 911 calls within an average of 7 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in every neighborhood. These changes will make policing smarter. Neighborhood policing will free up more time for officers to work on those persistent problems that can affect quality of life in your neighborhood. For example, in the University District, that means more foot and bike patrols around businesses. On Capitol Hill, it means more opportunity to patrol parks for drug dealers. In South Park and Georgetown, it means more time to stop property crimes. And in Rainier Beach, it provides more officer time to focus on safety in and around our schools. Together, these challenges will make our city safer. I'd like to thank the police chief, Gil Kurlikowski, his command staff, and also the precinct commanders of our 5 precincts who are here today, and I'd ask them to stand and be acknowledged. Thank you. I look forward to working with the City Council to get these officers funded, hired, trained, and on the streets. This month also marks the 1-year anniversary of the Capitol Hill massacre. I will never forget how I felt standing there that Saturday morning outside the home where 6 young people had lost their lives in a senseless act of gun violence. It is inconceivable to me why we as a society continue to allow criminals and people with evil intent access to such deadly firepower. We must do more to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and out of reach of children. I've called on our leaders in Olympia to take 3 common sense steps to reduce the toll these weapons take on our community. And I would point out that Seattle ranks 20th in the state of Washington in gun violence. There are 19 communities that have a higher rate of gun violence. In fact, one city has 3 times the gun violence of Seattle. So first, let's join the 18 other states that have closed the gun show loophole, which allows convicted felons to purchase weapons without a background check. Second, join the 8 states that have banned military-style assault weapons. Congress allowed this common-sense Brady Bill provision to expire. It is time we again stopped allowing this kind of firepower back on our streets. And third, require safe gun storage and trigger locks. This will help prevent the theft of weapons and protect children and others from accidental shootings. And it will reduce the number of homicides and suicides. We will never be able to say for sure whether any of these common sense steps could have prevented a particular incident in our community. But public health experts tell us that if we reduce the amount of illegal weaponry on our streets, it will save lives. And we will not waver in our determination to keep our city safe. Now finally, you knew you weren't going to get away without the V word coming up. So growing smart means embracing the natural assets that make this city such an incredible place to live. In Seattle, we're fortunate to be surrounded by water and mountains. From the very start of our city, this rich natural heritage is what has drawn so many people to our corner of the world. For years, a working central waterfront was vital to our city's economy. In the 1950s, when the state decided to build a double-deck highway along that waterfront, maybe it made sense to hide that tangle of railroad tracks and warehouses from the rest of the city. But today it's different. We value our waterfront differently. It isn't something to turn our back on. It is something we embrace. We have an opportunity to create a place where people can linger between the bustle of the city and the beauty of Puget Sound. and stand and marvel at the majestic Olympic Mountains. That kind of public space is as important to the future of our city as the sawmills, warehouses, and railroad tracks were nearly a century ago when this club was founded. When we want more people to live in our city, we must create compelling spaces where people can enjoy life in the city. The waterfront is our opportunity to create a great central waterfront park in the heart of our city. A glimpse of what's possible on our waterfront recently opened to rave reviews. The Seattle Art Museum transformed an old fuel tank farm into a stunning public sculpture park. Imagine what we could do if we tore down that 1950s era monstrosity that has veiled our waterfront in noise, shadow, and grime for half a century. Yet today, outside forces are trying to tell us what is best for Seattle's future. They insist that a bigger, noisier, elevated freeway is the answer. They are wrong. Our waterfront and our people deserve better. Voters have stood up many times to protect places that make our city special. In 1971, the Pike Place Market was the target. People said it would be cheaper just to tear it down. But Seattle rejected that short-sighted option and voted to preserve this treasure. Today, we celebrate the market's 100th birthday and recognize it as the soul of our city. 35 years ago, we rejected a plan for an elevated Bay Freeway along the south shore of Lake Union. In the same elections, voters put an end to a plan to run a freeway through the Arboretum in the central area. Those plans were wrong for Seattle then, and a new elevated freeway is just as wrong for Seattle today. What we see from Olympia today is determination without vision. We can't allow that to ruin what is right for our city. Let's show them what the Seattle spirit means. Let's show them what great things can be accomplished when people exercise their power to create a better future for themselves and their children. Let's show them what an unshakable belief in Seattle really means. I've pledged to follow the will of the people, and I hope and expect other elected officials will do the same. It's been a vigorous debate, and when the last ballot is mailed on March 13th, we will start a new chapter for our city. Whatever the results, we must set aside our differences and join together to find a path forward. The people of Seattle deserve nothing less. Our city is young, but our city is strong. We do not have to reach that far back in history to find the bedrock for our community. It is that foundation we will use as we build a better city for tomorrow. The views from the shores of Elliott Bay can be as inspiring as they were 155 years ago. So can the Seattle spirit. If we make the right choices today and confront the challenges before us in education and housing, public safety and transportation, we can clear away the fog that shrouds our future. We will show the world how one committed, great city can make a difference in the battle to protect our climate for our children and for their children. We see what is possible, and we are determined to achieve it. Thank you very much, and God bless our city, Seattle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have time for questions. I just want to point out to our members, we set up about 150 chairs in the back of the room for members of this community to join us, and I'm really pleased to see that the chairs are almost full. Thank you all for coming. We're honored to have you here. And you all will have opportunity to participate in the questions and answers as well. Mark Wright is back there with a roving microphone. And Todd Sommerfeld is up here. I'm going to throw out the first question, Mr. Mayor. You know, I heard a presentation a short time ago by Deputy Mayor Tim Cease, a really excellent presentation on the viaduct, and he highlighted something that I was unaware of before that. Obviously, if we do have the tunnel option, some people are going to benefit because property values are going to increase along the waterfront, and it seems only fair that the people whose property values are improved by this would share in the cost of the viaduct. And I was surprised to hear that you have a plan to make that happen.
Well, indeed we do. The difference in cost between the options that are up on the ballot on March 13th is a little over $600 million, which is a lot of money, about $2.8 billion versus $3.4 billion. And what we've said to the state is it should cost them no more than what it would cost them to replace what's there now. And that we will find the additional resources in order to make up that difference because we think it's important for our city. And that's the deal that we've stuck with. The largest contribution from the city would be from ratepayers as we move the city light facilities that are hanging from the bottom of the viaduct. Speaking of losing sleep, that's kind of where I lose sleep, is thinking about 1/3 of our electric power hanging down there, and then moving the water and sewer utilities. But the property owners immediately around the viaduct will see a significant increase in property value, and I've called for the creation of a local improvement district that would collect $250 million of that additional value. It's not all of it. It's a share, though, that I think is fair for the folks who so directly benefit.
I have a question from Don Nielsen.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here, and thank you for your wonderful comments. My question has to do with the viaduct, and I don't disagree with you that we don't need to replace the elevated roadway. The question, though, is why can't we tunnel someplace else? Why can't we tunnel under the water? Why can't we tunnel under Western, under First Avenue, under Second Avenue? Why do we have to tear up the waterfront for 6 or 8 years? You know, they built the English Channel Tunnel. Why can't we do a tunnel under Elliott Bay?
Of course, the English Channel Tunnel had another 0 or 2 at the end of it, which is a concern. Don, there are a couple of reasons why I think this particular alignment makes sense. One is that we have to replace the seawall anyway. And so we replace the seawall, it becomes the western wall of the tunnel. Then we essentially have a ditch next to it, put the roadway in the ditch and cover it over. You could do Second Avenue, you could do Western. Western's a little tougher because it's a real narrow right-of-way. But then you would be disrupting not only the area around the seawall and the viaduct, but you would be disrupting a second area as well for 6 or 8 years. So this confines the impact to one area. We go at it as fast as we can. We get it done. We get it put back together, and hopefully we save a little bit of money by combining that seawall along with the tunnel.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Teresa Clark. I'm a member of the Associated Student Council at Seattle Central Community College. And my question is also about the viaduct. I'm in an environmental science class, so the viaduct has come up quite a bit. And we were discussing a third option, no and no, and putting the money that would go into a new viaduct into transportation. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I'm a strong believer in transit. I'm the last surviving original board member of Sound Transit, which kind of went through its own cycle of popularity and unpopularity earlier this decade. And we're building a light rail system that will open up in 2009. So I actually think of the replacement of the viaduct and the building of the light rail, which will be under 3rd Avenue, as sort of a joint corridor, a joint project. We'll have that heavy lifting rail capacity for transit, and then we'll have the capacity for freight and goods and services that connect our industrial and maritime job areas. So I see it as a balance between replacing some of the capacity that's there now and enhancing not only transit but bicycle and pedestrian as well. Should the voters vote no and no, then we've got a challenge in trying to figure out how we'll make that work. It's the first option we looked at the city when I became mayor, was a surface transit option. The challenge you have is there's 110,000 vehicles a day that now use the viaduct, and being able to absorb all of that in transit or surface streets or other modes is a huge challenge. I don't dispute that you can absorb some of it, and maybe a good chunk of it. The concern I have is, what does it do to our economic sectors if we try and absorb all of it at once?
A question from Michael O'Byrne.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for your comments. With regard to your global warming positions, what would be your position in keeping all of the dams in place on the eastern Washington, Columbia, and Snake Rivers, and the addition of nuclear power to the mix?
Well, I'll tell you, we rely on hydroelectric power, so I am going to throw no rocks in this glass house. The city of Seattle has a proud tradition of hydroelectric power. We have 3 dams on the Skagit River system and 1 on the Pend Oreille system in northeast Washington. And we work very hard to have as little impact as possible on the environment. In fact, in the Skagit, we have no negative impact on the salmon runs. In fact, we have participated in creating record runs on the Skagit system, and we're really proud of that. Nuclear is a good question. We've had kind of a bad experience in Washington State with nuclear power, both in terms of the waste at Hanford that is now making its way in the groundwater to the Columbia River, despite billions of dollars being spent to try and stop it, and in terms of the financial fallout from the whoops experience in the 70s. So, and that may sound negative, but I think if you solve the waste problem and you solve the financing challenge, then nuclear might be part of the future. I suspect that Washington State will be amongst the last to embrace that. So we're going to need to be open, though, to different alternative forms of energy. Hydroelectric power, we're very, very fortunate, but we actually have more at stake to lose because hydroelectric will go away if that snowpack goes away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
I want to finish the sticker here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for coming. I'm really proud that the city is a partner with Family Services and with our club to help build the support center for families here in Seattle. And I'm proud to tell you that as of today, 470 of your fellow Rotarians have made a commitment to support this campaign, and we are right on the threshold of reaching our $4 million goal. I mean, within $80,000. Like many of you, yesterday I was at the University of Washington with a celebration, 2 billion reasons to celebrate. And you know that a few years ago they set a goal of raising $2 billion, and when they got there a few years early, they just added another 500,000. So I thought we'd just add another 500,000 onto our goal and keep going. So would you help me stick this up here? Thank you once again, Mayor Nichols, for your leadership and for your service to the people of our community. And thanks again to Councilmember Drago, Councilmember Godden, all of the great public servants, and especially the members of our great Seattle Police Department for being here today. Thank you. I can't think of a better example of service above self. Aggie Sweeney, Brenda Barnett, we are honored to have you as members of this great club. Now, next week, March 14, I can tell you where we're going to be, at the Red Lion on 5th Avenue. Problem is, our speaker has been called away. General Dubik was going to speak to us, and he's been summoned to Iraq. So David Endicott and the program committee are scrambling to come up with a program for next week, and I'm 100% confident that they will come up with another terrific program. From my vantage point, this clearly is an example of this week's pretty good rule, which is Hire people who are smarter than you are. Then listen to them and take care of them. See you next week. We are adjourned.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from Enterprise Seattle. For over 35 years, Enterprise Seattle has provided client-based economic development services to businesses throughout King County and its 39 cities. More information on Enterprise Seattle and how they help businesses grow and prosper can be found at www.enterpriseseattle.org. And by First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.